Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Ancient Historia. Today's one is going to be a little bit short. We're just going to be quickly focusing on the general observations on the Tartarian nations. Now this comes from the Universal Magazine of Knowledge and Pleasure, which was out from June 1747 to December 1803. So this was volume 91, released in August of 1792, and I'm just going to be reading to you what it says here. So this is the general observations on the Tartarian nations, which seems to be from the travels into Norway, Denmark and Russia in 1788, 1789, 1790, and 1791. And this is a copy of that book at the moment on Amazon, costing quite a bit to get a version, but it was Andrew Swinton. I'm sure we can find one. And yes, there is a copy here. So what I'll do is I'll include a link to both this document and the one that we're looking at. So if you would like to have a look at that for yourselves, you can do. I'll put that in the description. And we're going to just read through this one that's posted on the side. So yeah, if you like this, just follow the link in the description and you'll be able to download it. There's EPUBs. I find the PDFs are the best because these are just converted into ebooks from the PDFs and they don't go too smoothly. So if you get the PDF version, it'll just give it you like this. So you'll be able to find exactly where these quotes come from. The Russians, not many hundred years ago, were in the same state as the Tatars now are, and even after they settled in the country of Muscovy, they continued under bondage to the Tatar nations, who surrounded them upon all sides. So that's talking about the Russians, that even after they settled in the country of Muscovy, they continued under the bondage of the Tatar nations, and they were surrounded upon all sides, which would obviously indicate that the Tatars were in areas like Poland and Ukraine. Well, we know they were in Ukraine, but moving even further around, possibly in Poland, Belarus, these kind of regions, for them to be surrounded on all sides. The Tsar, Ivan Vasilievich I, released his people from this degrading situation, and his successor, Ivan Vasilievich II, effectually rooted out those freebooters and overawed them in their turn. From this period, the Russian monarchs extended their conquests, and by a rapid progress, the vast regions from the banks of the Dnieper to the Kamchatka, which views from its shores the American mountains, a space of 4,000 miles, acknowledged their scepter. So that's saying that the Russian monarchs, once taking this region back, they progressed rapidly and took every piece of land between the Dnieper and Kamchatka, which obviously they're talking about being at the Bering Strait, being able to view the American mountains, which I'm not sure if you can, but they say they can. A space of 4,000 miles, that's what they conquered. The most northerly parts of Siberia are inhabited by Finns and Tatar tribes in the lowest state of civilization. The southern provinces border upon Tartary properly so called. There are many of the Tatars still independent, if we call by that name the liberty of running from the protection of one sovereign to that of another. The Russian government give them every encouragement to settle in Siberia and in the kingdoms of Kazan and Astrakhan, and the Tatars begin to show a disposition to become husbandmen. The Kalmuk hordes are the most obstinate. They dwell near the Volga and maintain themselves by fishing and with their flocks and herds. They refuse the name of Tatars because the word signifies a vagrant. The Kalmuks are esteemed by the other tribes as a superior class. The Kyrgyz are much inferior in character as well as in wealth. Yet I could not help looking with veneration upon our Scythian fathers, though in rags. The Kalmuks deny them. The Kyrgyz, Baskirs, and other Tatars deny the Finns. The Finns detest the Laplanders. And the Laplanders, buried in their earthen caves, esteem themselves of divine origin. This is the best ridicule of family pride and connections that I have met with. The Finns are quite industrious and consequently superior in some respects to all the others. But, say the Kalmuks, they are farmers, they till the ground, they are clowns. We are huntsmen and warriors, the immediate descendants of Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, conquerors of India and China. The Tartars are at this day divided into 4 grand divisions. The first inhabit their native plains of Tartary under their Khans. The second are mixed with the Chinese under the same government of laws. The third, having submitted to the government of Russia or to its protection, dwell in Siberia and upon the banks of the Volga. And unfortunately, the next page is cut off. So we will jump to our book on Internet Archive to hopefully provide us with the rest of this context. I've managed to locate the exact passage that this comes from. It's page 252 in this book. We'll find where we're up to, but if anyone wants to find that, that's page 252 onwards, and it does seem there are even more interesting things in this book that we're not going to touch on today, but that we can do in the future. And carrying on from where we were at, we talked about the first inhabitants being on the plains of Tartary under the Khans, the second mixed with the Chinese under the same government of laws, the third having submitted to the government of Russia or to its protection, dwell in Siberia and upon the banks of the Volga, and the fourth acknowledged the Sultan of Constantinople for their chief and pitched their tents in Little Tartary. The last of these divisions arrived under the command of a descendant of Zingis Khan. At the time, the Crimea was in possession of the Genesee, whom they drove out by the assistance of the Turks, hence the alliance between these two hordes. The Turks consider the Tartars as slaves, and their princes of the House of Giri, their first leader, receive an annual subsidy from the Porte, upon condition of appearing in the field with an army in the Turkish wars. The Turks dispose their princes at pleasure, but they appoint a Khan always from among the relations of the Girian race. Now, we weren't meant to continue too far on, we were only meant to read this small bit, but there is something I wanted to bring up just here, which I found very interesting. The ruin of the Chinese Empire would have naturally followed its conquest by the different nations of Tartars, had the Tartars then been the barbarous race they now are, and a second Rome have tumbled before the Goths of Scythia. The Romans, unable to save themselves, saved China. In their expeditions into Tartary, they left behind them a taste for the arts, and no doubt many stragglers of their legions. The Tartars had, besides in their wars with India, procured a taste for industry as well as for plunder, and monuments of ancient grandeur, the remains of noble cities and other works, incontestably prove that Tartary was formerly the seat of elegance and arts. Those tribes who boast their resemblance to the ancient Mongols by their present vagrant life expose their ignorance and degeneracy. That is possibly one of the most important paragraphs we've actually read on this channel about Tartary, because it's telling you that the barbarous nature of the tribes today, the nomadic lifestyle that we're told is how it has always been, was in fact not the way that it was. They're saying that the Tartars were not barbarous. They had great cities, noble cities, and other works that incontestably prove that Tartary was formerly the seat of elegance and arts. The seat. So what does that tell you about what Tartary really was? Back to the main document that we were here to read. We can go through the rest of this document at some point, but the main idea of making today's video was actually intending to just be a short one, just to give you guys a small piece of information that we could talk about, which is this. A document that was written in 1792 is saying that the Russians, not many hundred years ago, so a few hundred years before 1792, were in the same position that the Tartars now are. And that's obviously 1792. So they're saying that the Tartars were in control of the Russians, that they ruled the Russians, and that the Russians somehow managed, under Ivan Vasilievich I, to release their people from these Tartars, and then Ivan Vasilievich II supposedly rooted them out, and in turn, they became the ones that were subjected. And it says that this Russian monarchy extended their conquests so fast that they went from the Dnieper to Kamchatka and took all of that land a space of 4,000 miles acknowledged their scepter. And it also talked about the most northerly parts of Siberia being inhabited by Finns. And it also talked about the Finns hating the Laplanders, who are also of these Tartars or of this region, and that the Laplanders esteem themselves of divine origin. We know the Russian government was encouraging Tartars of Tartary to move north into Siberia, as well as Kazan and Astrakhan, where they'd be under the protection of the Russians. And obviously after this, in our other videos on Tartarian in the news, we saw how Russia moved south into independent Tartary and how China expanded its borders outwards, taking over the rest. So Russia was offering the Tartars to come live here before we invade. Says how the Kyrgyz, the Baskirs and the other Tartars deny the Finns, and the Kalmucks are esteemed as the superior class, with the Kyrgyz being the inferior class. And it finishes off by saying that at this day in 1792, the Tartars are divided into the 4 divisions: the first in Tartary under their Khans, the second with the Chinese under the same rules as the Chinese, the third has already submitted to Russia and has moved into Siberia or Kazan and Astrakhan upon the Volga, and the fourth is in Little Tartary and is under the protection of Constantinople in 1792. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment down below. It really helps in the fight against the algorithm, because I'm definitely getting shadow banned at this point, not getting as many views as we were, because I think the YouTube algorithm has finally cottoned on to the fact that we're promoting the truth. Let me know as well what you think about these smaller videos which focus on individual topics, that we're not jumping around too much. Hopefully I did show a few maps during this in editing, but make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so that you get notified every time a video comes out, because again, YouTube likes to hide these things from you guys. Some people also have been saying they were unsubscribed recently, so do check you are still subscribed. If you feel you haven't heard from me in a while, maybe make sure. If you'd like to support the channel, there are a few ways you can do so. You can join the Patreon or the channel memberships. That will give you access to my members Discord. It's just a small little channel where I can chat to you guys. We do a lot of research. I post literally all my research all day in there. I also post a load of books and stuff. All this stuff that I source, all the links, they go in there. Giant library we've got going, so if you're interested in that, it's definitely worth it. But other than that, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Ancient Historia.